With 2 successes on the NES, it was clear that the Zelda series was on its way to become one of the flagships of Nintendo's company. But as I'm sure many of you familiar with this game are aware, the franchise's popularity was only about to grow as the 3rd entry was about to hit the shelves. As the team began to lay out plans for the next title, the project was originally headed for a direction you might not expect: the NES. Yeah, it turns out the original plan was to make a 3rd Zelda game for the Famicom and Nintendo Entertainment System, and if you thought Zelda 2 was leaning into the RPG elements, this game was at one point supposed to have a 4-member party system like it was a Final Fantasy game or something. Now, I don't know if there were any plans to implement like turn-based combat or anything, but it's crazy to think just how different this title was originally going to be. As Nintendo started to push their new hardware with the Super Nintendo, however, it was clear Zelda would have to evolve with the tech, and as one thing led to another, we eventually got the game that helped solidify the identity of the series for decades to come. Not as many big differences between the Japanese and American versions of the game this time either, as the specs between the Super Famicom and Super Nintendo were a lot closer than the systems that came before it. There were some localization changes here and there, but really the biggest difference would have to be the title of the game itself. Honestly, not as many differences with the cartridge this time around either. No gold card for the Super Nintendo game, sadly, but it did have a variant cart with a different label. Well, I'm sure none of that is really what you're here for, so without any further delay, spoilers ahead, gang. It's time to take a look at The Legend of Zelda: Triforce of the Gods. Or as it's known here in the States, Link to the Past. While Zelda 2 was a direct follow-up to its predecessor, A Link to the Past is actually a prequel to the games that came before it, set many years prior to the version of Hyrule that we've protected from Ganon. While it follows in the footsteps of the adventure of Link by putting a larger emphasis on the plot of the game, the lore of Hyrule is now offered up in the game itself, not just in the manual. The main premise picks up by introducing us to the realm in which the Triforce lies, deep within a place called the Golden Land, though it would later be called the Sacred Realm. As people learn the Triforce had the ability to grant the desires of those who touch it, battles begin to spark as people fought each other to enter the Golden Land and obtain unlimited power. But even those who made their way into the hidden world never returned. Soon, evil energy started to make its way out of this other realm, and in order to prevent further turmoil, the King of Hyrule appointed 7 sages to seal the way to the Golden Land. After centuries of peace, a sorcerer known as Aghanim came to Hyrule, killing the king and taking control of his forces. Princess Zelda is captured and uses her magic to call out for help, who's heard by a young man living not far from the castle, a humble village boy named Squeeb. Well, canonically, his name is Link, but they give you the option to call him whatever you want, so here we are. Okay, fine, I'll call him Link in the video. But the text stays the same. Link's uncle sets off to see what the commotion is at Hyrule Castle and warns him to stay home, but it was clearly foolish because all we have to do is grab the lantern and follow him to see that he somehow got himself mortally wounded within all of 2 minutes. He dies tragically, leaves Link his sword, and you now have to navigate Hyrule Castle and locate the princess, guide her through the underbelly of the building and into the safety of a sanctuary in the north of Hyrule. Turns out, Aghanim is attempting to capture 7 maidens across the land, the princess herself included, who are actually descendants of the sages who once sealed away the Golden Land. His goal is to use their power to open the way to this sacred realm and capture the Triforce for himself, and in order to defeat him, Link must travel to 3 temples across the kingdom and collect the pendants lying within them. This is where the player is introduced to several things, the first of which would be the nature of Hyrule itself. Let me explain. So the game carries over the core philosophy of the first 2 titles. You have a main goal with the pendants and the temples, but getting there is all up to you. The land of Hyrule itself is the heart of the game, tethering everything together here. Or at least it is to me, but I'll get into that later. I mean, how do you discover the location of these 3 temples? Why, by traveling to Kakariko Village and speaking with the people there. Some of which are super chill, like this guy that will sell you an empty bottle, allowing you to carry stuff like potions to recover health or magic, or some kid that will give you a bug net to capture wasps or fairies that you can store in those aforementioned bottles, and will revive you upon death, giving you some handy tools that will keep you alive during your journey. Other villagers are less helpful. See, Aghanim has been spreading his influence across the land, and there's even a nasty rumor going around that Link kidnapped Princess Zelda, and some of the gullible people who live in the village will call on the guards to come arrest you if they see you walking around town. Not very many people are like this though. A lot of them still trust and believe in Link. It's a good way of showcasing that he's got a sense of place here in his home kingdom, and the majority of people you interact with will give you little hints about traversing the world, offer little mini games where you can earn more money, or help lead you to new upgrades like heart pieces. Like in the earlier games, heart containers will increase your overall health, but a new addition is that the full heart containers will really only be found at the end of dungeons. Maxing out your health meter will rely on you locating pieces of hearts scattered all across the land in hidden away caves, at the end of minigames, just tucked away from the untrained eye, that sort of thing. And once you've collected 4, you can complete a new heart container. Of course, that's not the only way to build up your capabilities through exploration. You can find several helpful items in Hyrule that will enhance your capabilities, like the River Zora giving you the flippers that will allow you to swim, or the magic cape that can make you temporarily invisible or invincible. And that's not all, there's even a mysterious pond where you can drop in certain items to have a fairy upgrade them, like beefing up your shield's defensive abilities or powering up your boomerang. Something I think is sort of underappreciated though are these medallions you can obtain from 3 ancient stone tablets across the region. Some are used to open the way to specific dungeons, but they can also be used as deadly weapons in battle, and I've even found that they're incredibly effective against certain bosses. Of course, the greatest tools you'll add to your arsenal will be found within the temples themselves, and yeah, the temples are often what people think of first when they start talking about The Legend of Zelda. The original game sure made the temples an important part of the gameplay. You were probably going to spend more time in the dungeons than anywhere else, but with the overworld feeling much more alive in this particular title, sometimes the temples feel a little in the way here. I might be the only person that feels like this. Like, I get that the stuff here is good. You enter a dungeon, get the basic feel for its layout, you open chests to get a map, a compass to let you see where certain items of interest are, obtain keys to open up doors, and now there's a big key to collect that will open up the way to the boss of each dungeon, but also grant access to the temple's large chest, which will contain the special item of that temple, and these will be some of the most important tools in the game. Stuff like a bow, the power glove that will let you lift and throw much heavier objects than you could before, the hook shot, which will let you latch onto faraway objects and pull yourself over to them, still one of my favorite Zelda items to this day, the ice and fire rods that will let you use magic attacks, a hammer to slam down obstacles in your path. Like, there's a lot of stuff, and not every item like this is going to be found in a temple. Some of it you have to go hunt for on your own. The bosses themselves can pack a bit more of a punch than before too. Not all of them, there are a few bosses that can go down with barely a fight, but there are some that take an absurd amount of punishment and deal it too. And then there's this stupid worm. He can knock you off the tower where you're fighting him, and when you make your way back up to him, he's already regenerated his health, and then you just have to fight him again and hope he doesn't. I'm not the first person to complain about this. I know, I get it, but it's a really annoying design choice, and if the vast majority of people all seem to hate it, that probably means it sucks. To start talking about some stuff that only seems to annoy me though, I guess we have to move into the main meat of the game. Once you collect the 3 pendants from the opening temples, you can travel to the Lost Woods, and with a little searching, you can find and obtain the legendary Blade of Evil's Bane, a weapon forged to repel evil and darkness itself, the Master Sword. With this, you can return to Hyrule Castle, which is something of a little temple or gauntlet in and of itself. I'll get back to that in a minute. You encounter Aghanim, who's using Zelda's power to break the seal to the Golden Land, and after a quick little scuffle, you find yourself cast into this legendary realm, only to see it has become a corrupted and twisted reflection of the Hyrule Kingdom itself, the Dark World. This is the main draw of the game, so to speak. While this kind of concept has been toyed around with before and since, the way that the Dark World is implemented into the gameplay here helps keep this game feeling unlike any other. But I also can't help but wonder if maybe it overstates its welcome a little bit. The real game has begun. You must travel across 7 new temples and free the spirits of the maidens that are trapped there. Only then will you be able to make your counteroffensive against Aghanim. To do this, you'll have to make use of a magic mirror that will allow you to travel between the 2 versions of Hyrule. Your natural state is now in the Dark World, and you've only been able to keep your natural form with the help of a moon pearl that you found in a previous temple. And by using the magic mirror, you can move over to the Light World in the same location you were in before. You'll leave behind a little portal that you can use to travel back to the Dark World, and this will call for a bit of experimenting with how you can use one version of the world or the other to overcome obstacles in your path and get around certain objects in the terrain or just travel around the environment. Some of the ways this is implemented are pretty clever too. The game really encourages you to try this out a lot and see how you can use the differing versions of the same place to your advantage. Maybe use the mirror on this one spot in the Dark World so you can exit on a cliff you normally wouldn't be able to access in the Light World and collect a piece of heart. The game will also call you to use the franchise's first instance of fast travel as well. There's a small side quest where you can find a young man with a flute in the woods and help put his soul to rest as he becomes trapped in the Dark World and permanently transformed. Once you play this flute for the boy's father back in Kakariko Village, he'll instruct you to play the song near a windmill in Kakariko, which will prompt a bird to come popping out of it? What? You can use this song anywhere in the light world to have the bird fly you to specific spots around the map, and some of these drop-off points will prove pretty essential in navigating around locations, even in the Dark World. As in Hyrule proper, you can find new portals to the Dark World that you can use to return even if you've lost track of where you used the magic mirror. And some of these happen to be placed right outside of drop-off points. The way the game challenges you to keep in mind two overlapping versions of the same space even follows into some of the Dark World temples. The Skull Woods are a great example. I love how it makes you travel above ground in the forest to find new places to drop down into the temple below at various points. It's one of the most creative ways I've seen this kind of element handled, rivaling dungeon design that I've seen even to this day, but the thing is, there's not a lot of places where I can recall stuff like that. There's some vaguely creative ways traveling between the light and dark world is used to open up the way to some temples, but once you get inside, they're usually pretty standard, and I mean standard. If I had to choose my biggest criticism with this game, I think it would be with the temples. On one hand, I actually enjoy the challenge here. There's a couple of temples in A Link to the Past that really get me scratching my head and having to think about how to proceed. Not all temples will be like that later on, so I enjoyed it while it was here, but outside of a few remarkable moments of creativity, like having to lead a seemingly innocent girl through a temple only to find out she's the boss of the place, I feel like I'm just kind of going through these locations, and I just don't think the time spent in the dungeons matches how rewarding exploring the overworld can be. It gets boring. It's honestly kind of tedious from time to time, but there's so many temples in this game. If you count repeated trips to Hyrule Castle and the final dungeon at the end, there's 13 dungeons in this game, and no, I don't think it's always time well spent. I honestly would have liked it if some of the more interesting elements were taken from some of these temples and melded together, resulting in fewer dungeons, sure, but at least I would have remembered each one a little more fondly. Instead, I really can't recall much time that I spent in them, and when I can, it's usually how annoying this part was, or how stupidly designed the Ice Palace is. Get the Cane of Somaria from Misery Mire before tackling this place, please. This is honestly the only benefit I feel exists from you being able to tackle the Dark World temples in any order, and it's just to make a joke out of what would otherwise be an incredibly monotonous puzzle in one dungeon, so was it really even worth it? Yeah, you know what else I'm not crazy about? I don't find the combat in this game as enjoyable or well-paced as it was in Zelda 2, but man, they pack so many enemies into this game that'll start pouring out of the walls at every turn. There's times when it feels like Ganon just dropped a bucket full of monsters that start spilling all over these rooms with no rhyme or reason. Nah, here's just an unreasonable amount of random goons to fight. And oh, right, Ganon. Yeah, once you free the maidens and fight Aghanim again, it's revealed that he was actually just a puppet of the Dark Lord Ganon, who once used the Triforce to wish for ultimate power and control, his corrupt desires transforming the Golden Land into the dark world we've been battling through. Thankfully, I do really like the fight with him, but it's once again only beatable if you collect the silver arrows from the mystery pond in the Dark World. It is nearby. Actually, it's in the same structure as the final boss fight, but you can only access the pond with the use of super bombs, which don't unlock until you've done very specific things in the Dark World, and by then, you might not even realize that the super bombs exist at all, and then yeah, you might not even know that the silver arrows are a thing. This was sort of acceptable given the archaic nature of the NES, but I would expect a Super Nintendo title to be a little better about communicating the location and necessity of an item you have to have in order to take down the final boss. Kill Ganon, speak with the Triforce who gives you a chance to return both worlds to the way they should be, pretend the main antagonist of this series has actually gone for good this time despite the fact that this is a prequel to other games where he also exists. Yeah, wrap your head around that piece of text. And lay the Master Sword back to rest. This was a really weird title to go back to, for however fondly I remembered A Link to the Past. It's just not a game that I went back to replay very often, and now I think I finally understand why. One of the things that the game focuses on the most, the dungeons, is something that I found really uninteresting, or at worst, the most irritating part of the game. There's still so much to love about this game. I adore the art direction, and I still think it's one of the best looking games in the series. I have no idea why Link has pink hair in this game. Maybe it was a color palette thing, but either way, I'm into it. I think it looks cool. The atmosphere is top notch. The overworld is wonderful and a lot of fun to explore. The characters in the game are quirky and fun to interact with. The music in this game is astounding. I don't think I've really talked enough about the music in these games so far, but this title has some of the best, and a lot of it is still being used today. That actually goes for a lot of elements here too. Even this core structure is something that the Zelda series would continue to use later down the road. Design choices like these bokoblin statues that I swear were a direct inspiration for the creatures in Skyward Sword. Even fun, stupid stuff like how if you attack Cuckoos enough times, they'll eventually start raining hell on you with a flurry of vengeance and rage. But despite so many great things that this game helps solidify as staples of the series, I still think it spends way too much time on temples that aren't really doing much to keep my interest, and I feel feel like they're too long, too dull, and too numerous. I would never say I don't recommend this game. I absolutely do. It's so easily accessible on Nintendo's platform, and I think everyone interested in the series should at least give it a try. But I also think that maybe The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past hasn't aged as gracefully as I would have liked to think. This is not going to be a popular opinion, I can already tell, and it's not even a conclusion that I'm happy to reach myself, but after replaying this title, I think I can definitely say that I respect A Link to the Past more than I enjoy it. Still, I don't hate this game, I actually still like quite a bit about it, but I am disappointed that I didn't enjoy this revisit as much as I thought I was going to. Now, is that going to be the case for the next game in our lineup? There's only one way to find out. Sadly, I am gonna have to put our Ocarina of Time review on hold until at least after October, but I do think we still have time to take a look at the first handheld game in the Zelda series before Metroid Month arrives. Until then, remember that my top tier patrons get to see these videos 2 days early. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, Discord, Sunset City, whichever you prefer, links in the description, and of course, as always, spread the word, tell your friends, and until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching. See you next mission. Hey there everyone, thank you so much for watching. I know it took a long time to get this one done, but trust me, I had my reasons. And I have a lot planned coming up. Oh man, October is gonna be a ton of fun this year, and I've got so much fun stuff planned. I do at least want to crank out the Link's Awakening video before then, but I am going to be spending the majority of September mostly just working on Metroid Month. So I hope you understand if uploads are going to be kind of dry, but it's going to be worth it in October because that will be, again, like a video every single week. That might even count some videos getting uploaded not even on my channel. We'll see, no promises, but we'll see. Of course, I wouldn't get any of these opportunities. I would not get to do what I love to do if it wasn't for viewers like you and my top tier patrons. This month, they are Christine Larkin, Patricia Marcoux, Earl Valco, Wonton Photo, Nicholas Morgan, Jeremiah Harrison, Mr. SP, and Cyrus the Skeptic. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. You all make it possible, and you make it worth it. With all of that said, I still have a lot of work to do. I'm gonna go ahead and try to crank this video out and get to work on the next one. All right, everybody, love y'all, and I will see you around. All right, peace.